Okay, so for the shoulder bells, there's 4 little cast pieces. They are going to glue on the inside right here between the nubs. There's a kind of a square indentation or indication of where that is, and right here as well. You're going to need to sand this area, both square areas, to make sure it gets a good bond. I'm going to take a palm sander and clean up the edges from the casts, and also on these I'm going to sand this side and a little bit on the glossy side. Now this is backwards from most of the cast pieces, and I say that because this area here is what's actually going to glue this direction with the flat glossy side outward. The reason why I'm going to sand this flat glossy side a little bit is that I'm prepping for the paint work. So I want that just sanded a tiny bit for paint. And the snap is actually going to be protruding on this side. So it's going to be hard to sand it later. So first thing is I'm going to be drilling out the holes. I've already drilled these out. This is for the machine screws to hold the snaps in place. Instead of doing the backside to the snap, we're going to be using machine screws and nuts to hold that in place. So there's already a dimple in here, and I'm just going to drill all 4 of them now. And I want to make sure that the machine screw is going to fit. Yeah, all right, so that's the correct size hole. Okay, great. So I'm going to sand these parts as I mentioned, and then show you how to assemble it. Okay, so sanding the shoulder bells, I'm going to clean up this edge here. I'm going to use a palm sander. And I recommend stopping and checking. You don't want to sand too much too far, so just a little bit at a time. Get to a point where if you want to stop and you want to sand the rest by hand, you're welcome to do that. So the grit I'm using right now on this is not a very 220. You want it to blend with what's already there. Just get rid of the little extra. And then just go around all the edges. Just sometimes the casting has a little bit of sharpness to it. Smooth it out a tiny bit. You're going to have to lightly sand the entire thing for painting purposes, so have that in mind. But for right now, let's just kind of clean up the edge. All right, so you just want to make it smooth all the way around like that. And for the assembly purposes as well, as I mentioned, we need a sand. So you kind of see there's this square area right. if I can trace that out. Right there. And the other one is right here. You see this one is left. So you might want to just go ahead and mark up above here that it's left, since that's going to get covered because you got to glue that there. And then this one, since I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and put the R right. Trace out this square again just so you can see that I'm going to be sanding that. And that, okay? Okay, so I've gone around all the edges with the palm sander and little sandpaper, just making sure all the casting edges are smooth. So the square indentations is where I need to sand so that these will glue there. So it's just kill the shine in that square area, make sure it's nice and lightly rough so that the glue bonds. And as I mentioned before, all the cast parts you want to clean with liquid Dawn dish soap and lightly warm water, not hot water. Make sure everything is thoroughly dry before you do any actual assembly, but it's important that you clean all the parts first. You don't want any casting residue left behind on the parts. That will affect the paint and it will affect gluing. Okay, so I mean, you can take the time now and sand the entire inside and the entire outside to prep for paint, but right now I'm focused more on just the assembly purposes. So that's why I'm sanding the areas where I'm going to be gluing those, and I'll do the same to this one. Since it's going to be getting glue there, you can see I've marked just the letters up above there. The obvious difference is the angles here. They are mirrored, so if you haven't done that, that's okay. You'll know when you look at it from the outside. Something else you can do if you want is these nubs. If they don't cast well, which a lot of times they don't, you can use a Dremel and just kind of Dremel out the corners and just lightly scuff the material in there where it's shiny. And you can rebuild those corners up with epoxy or Bondo, you know. Let me grab some epoxy. So something like this. You mix the two parts together and you can shape it and it'll get really hard and you can file it, sand it. I recommend if you're going to shape that, try to shape it exactly the way you want it because this stuff is really hard to sand. But that's an option if you wanted to fill in any of the casting issues that occur with those. All right, so the insides of those are all sanded. Now, got to sand these. Use palm sander, but I don't want to affect the curvature of these. This is so that it fits in here, that's slightly curved. So have that in mind. If you want to just do it by hand, that's fine. You need it where it's going to make contact to the inner part of the shoulder bells. This is the side we're going to be gluing down after the snaps have been installed. I'm just going to go around each side twice just to make sure it's got a good sand so that I know it's going to get a good bond. And then this side, as I mentioned, this is just sanding it to help with the painting The snap's actually going to be sitting on this side. And I figured it would be easier to sand this now than when a snap is sitting there. So I'm sanding just enough to get rid of the shine. All right, so you want it to look like that. You see the difference? Okay, so I'll repeat that to these others, and then we'll assemble the snaps and glue it all in. Okay. All right, let's go assemble these.